Welcome to the Newsmakers Podcast. I'm Billy Hollowell, and this is a show where we go behind the headlines every day to bring you an interview with a pastor, entertainer, politician, or other notable news figure. And this is a show, again, it's daily, but it's based on our weekly TV show, which is also called Newsmakers. You can watch it on the CBN News channel and also on our YouTube page. And on this show, every day, we dive deep. It's a little more longer form with one of the people who you will often see on our Newsmakers show or across the CBN News platforms. On today's Newsmakers, Joel Veldkamp from Christian Solidarity International joins us to sound the alarm on what's happening in Bangladesh. About a month after the government fell in that country, we are seeing absolute chaos, pandemonium, and Christians, Hindus, and other minority groups are under fire. He shares some deeply troubling stories and explains what we need to know about the situation there in Bangladesh. With no further ado, here is Joel Veldkamp. Joel, it's always good to have you on. And when you come on, you are really always breaking down important issues for us, helping us understand what's happening when it comes to persecution around the globe. There's a story in Bangladesh right now that a lot of people, I am certain, do not know. They have no idea what's happening there. Let's just start from a 30,000-foot view. About a month ago, something pretty shocking happened. Take us through the events there on the ground.
Yeah, about a month ago, after a few weeks of really bloody protests and bloody suppression of protests by the government of Bangladesh was overthrown in essentially a military coup. And what followed was about a week of rioting in which Hindus and Christians and Buddhists all across Bangladesh were attacked by mobs organized by Islamist groups. Bangladesh is a majority Muslim country. It's over 90% Muslim, but it has a long history of secularism and tolerance, and the government had been a secular government, but now that government has been overthrown, and we're extremely concerned that the floodgates are kind of now open for much wider Islamist and jihadist violence against Christians, against Buddhists, against Hindus, against all the non-Muslims in the country.
Yeah, and I know that the Hindu groups, I think it's under 10% of the population, 8% of the population. Christians are less than half of a percentage point, I believe.
Yeah,
I may have that. So it's very low. But immediately when you have this sort of instability, and I know some of this was led by students at universities, but when you have this kind of instability and you're not sure where your government's heading, it's a terrifying situation. But then having those minority groups suddenly be the target. What are some of the specific stories? Because right now we're seeing a number, not a lot, because actually the media has not necessarily been covering this very intensely. But what we do see are some unconfirmed reports or speculation that churches are being destroyed or homes are being destroyed. Talk a little bit about what you have heard from, you actually have a project partner there who's on the ground.
Yeah, in fact, just 2 days ago, I was able to talk to CSI's main project partner in Bangladesh. He's no longer in Bangladesh. He's in a third country. He had to flee for his life, basically. About 5 days after the military coup, a large group of Islamic extremists came to his house. They were carrying swords, they were carrying guns, and they threatened him and his wife. And they said, this is going to be a 100% Muslim country from now on. There's no room for Hindus, there's no room for Christians. You have to leave. And so he left. He said that as he left, he saw that other Christian homes in his neighborhood had been marked with crosses by the extremists so that everyone could tell who was a Christian and who was a potential target. So now he's out of the country. I'm very grateful that we got to talk to him because he was really in a very dangerous situation, fleeing on foot, not a lot of money on hand. But thankfully he's safe now and he's trying to reestablish contact with his partners in the country. But we know hundreds of Hindu temples across Bangladesh were attacked, dozens of churches. In the region of Dhaka, the capital city of Bangladesh, all of the Christian schools have had to shut down because these extremists have been making threats, telling teachers they have to wear the hijab, the veil that women are required to wear in Islamic law. Even girl students, young girls were threatened, saying you have to wear the hijab. So it's an extremely worrisome atmosphere right now.
What was his, spiritual and mental state after going through that? I mean, you described a situation where people show up with swords. They tell him you need to leave right now. And thank God they told him you need to leave instead of killing him right on the spot. But not a good situation, having to go through the jungle on foot to escape. What sort of, what was his posture at this point, mentally and spiritually, from your vantage point?
It's really interesting. He's a very strong man, and we've known him for a long time, and we've been working with him to help Christians in Bangladesh for a long time. And this is the first time we've really seen him be kind of shaken. He told us before the men came to his house, he'd actually seen people being attacked and killed in the streets of Dhaka. He said, I've seen things I can't ever forget. He told us, in that part of the world, there are lots of questions about migration and citizenship and who belongs where. So he's been used to using the word illegal immigrant a lot just in his daily life. And now he finds himself as an immigrant, as a refugee in another country, all of a sudden. But he was very grateful to God for his provisioning. He said there were a number of things that worked out just right. Like he had just enough money for a train ticket to a certain place once he got to the third country. He had just enough time to make a phone call, and the person on the other end answered, even though they were on the other side of the world at the time. So yeah, I think he's very emotional. He's very grateful to be alive, and as full of energy and determination as ever to try to make Bangladesh a safe place for Christians.
It's when it comes to persecution, and you've seen this again and again, it's really tragic to watch a situation where a country has fallen, the government has essentially fallen. You have a new government coming in. They are tasked with trying to figure out where things should go. But you have these groups of people. I mean, the dispute, and correct me if I'm wrong, seem to really be over payment and jobs and economic matters, right? But then you have these Islamist and extremist groups that come in, and they recognize an opportunity, just like they said to him, this is going to be a non-Christian, it's going to be a Muslim country, you need to leave, that they see an opportunity to thwart that. What are your biggest fears right now, based on where things stand, in how these extremist groups could potentially try to take a type of power that makes it a Muslim country only?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Billy, that it started off as a dispute over a certain number of jobs in the civil service were reserved for descendants of veterans of Bangladesh's independence war, which a lot of students felt was quite unfair. It actually was unfair. And the students were the ones who started the protest movement. But there are large Islamist organizations inside Bangladesh who are very well organized. One is called the Hizb ut-Tahrir, another is called Jamaat Islami. And they held back at first, trying to see which way the protest would go. And as they saw the protests gaining momentum, then they told their followers, now is the time to go to the streets. Now is the time actually to attack the Prime Minister's palace, which is what happened, which is what triggered her flight to India. So you can see that the students were kind of the face that the Islamist organizations used against their will, against their knowledge probably. Students had real concerns, they had legitimate grievances, they were protesting peacefully, but the Islamist organizations used this as an opportunity. And now what we're seeing is we have a situation of chaos where the best organized actors are these Islamist groups who are determined to build an Islamic state in Bangladesh. So our project partner in Bangladesh tells us that lots of teachers are being replaced with members of these groups all across the country. Lots of police are being replaced with members of these groups as we speak. And there's a pattern to Bangladesh's history where since Bangladesh's independence in 1971, there's been a number of military coups. And often what the military will do when it needs to secure its power base after it's overthrown a democratically elected government is they'll make an alliance with these Islamist groups. And again, we see the military has overthrown the elected government of Bangladesh, and there's a possibility that they will again make common cause with these Islamist groups. There's a real possibility that we'll see an Islamic state erected in Bangladesh. And at the worst end of this, we could see almost 10% of Bangladesh's population forced to flee.
It's just unimaginable. Another situation, globally that is just horrific. How has this affect, and will it affect Christian Solidarity International's work there in the region?
Yeah, it's already much harder than it was a month ago. We are responding to the crisis. We're bringing medical aid and food to Christian families who are forced to flee their homes in in the countryside of Bangladesh, in some of the villages. But yeah, at the moment, the network that we rely on to bring aid to Christians in Bangladesh is a bit scattered, a bit, in disarray. But I'm also encouraged to see that for a long time, a lot of our work in Bangladesh and other countries in Southeast Asia was capacity building. We were doing workshops for pastors. We were trying to educate Christian leaders about human rights and how to advocate for themselves, how to work together. And we're seeing this network come to life now. People who maybe met each other at a workshop that CSI was able to fund are now calling each other, exchanging information, exchanging tips on where to go to be safe, how to get aid. So that's one thing that I'm really encouraged by in the current crisis.
Well, Joel, I appreciate you and Christian Solidarity International, the work that you do, and for helping break this down so that people can be praying there for Bangladesh and for peace and for stability and for sanity in the midst of all of this. Appreciate your time, as always.
Thank you, Billy.
That's all for today's Newsmakers podcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode of the show, and also head over to the CBN News YouTube channel and the CBN News channel to watch Newsmakers every week. We'll see you soon.